This is the story of how I almost got murdered in Texas. So I had spent a few days in Austin visiting friends. I live in Louisiana. It's about a 2-day drive. And on my last day in Austin, my old friend Tom had commented on my Instagram story asking when I leave. And I said today. He told me that he lived an hour outside of Austin. And, hey, if you're driving back, I haven't seen you in years. It would be cool to catch up. He said I should stop by. And I was like, sure, why not? So I set my GPS for Tom's address, and it said about an hour-and-a-half drive. Tom and I had been friends back in high school, but we lost touch after graduation. We followed each other on social media, but we hadn't really spoken in years. When I pulled up, I noticed that his house was a little old-fashioned. It wasn't run down or anything, it was just aged. The wooden porch creaked under my steps, and when he opened the door, I caught the scent of old wood and something rustic, like an old cabin in the woods. Tom was, of course, very welcoming, giving me a big hug and pulling me inside. Some friendships just stay as pure as the day you met. No matter how much time passes, the inside of the house was just as old as the outside. The furniture looked like it had been there since the 70s, and every step I took on the hardwood floor made a loud creak. It kind of felt like Texas. It was kind of charming in a way, like stepping back in time. We sat down in the living room and started catching up, and it was just like old times, drinking whiskey and talking about life. It was about 5 Kalkim when I arrived. This is the scariest thing I've ever seen in a haunted house. So a few years ago, I went to a friend's house for dinner. We started off the night with some drinks, and by this point, 1 drink turned into 2, 2 into 3, and before I knew it, I was pretty drunk. The warmth of the alcohol made the room feel smaller and cozier, but also heavier. Hours passed, like minutes, honestly. We were having such a good time catching up that eventually he dropped the question I knew he'd ask. "Hey man, you got a long drive back. Why don't you crash here for the night?" he offered. I hesitated, but he was right. I wasn't in any shape to be on the road. I said, yeah, good idea, and I asked if I could take the couch. And then he said, no, I got a spare room. It's nothing fancy, but it's better than the couch. That was good enough for me. We ordered some Chinese food that was delivered, and after a while he led me down a short hallway to the spare bedroom. I didn't pay much attention to the inside of the room because I was hammered, we both were. But I remember the air in the room was still like the room hadn't been used in a long time. I barely had time to register my surroundings before I collapsed onto the bed, completely exhausted and drunk. I remember the first time I saw it. I was drunk. I just rolled over in bed and there it was. I tried to ignore it. It was just a coat, nothing more. But I couldn't help myself. I peeked again. Still there. I squeezed my eyes shut, took a deep breath, and forced myself to sleep. I don't know how long I was out there before I woke up again. It wasn't just the discomfort that pulled me from sleep. It was sound. A slow, soft creaking, like someone stepping carefully on an old wooden floor. My eyes shot open. The room was dimly lit now, dawn creeping in through the cracks in the curtains. I could see it then. Through the blinds, I turned my head toward the corner and my stomach dropped. The coat was gone. I sat up so fast that my head spun. My body was buzzing with a sickening mix of fear and leftover alcohol. I scanned the room, my heart thumping against my ribs. There was nothing in the corner, just an empty closet door. I threw the covers off and rushed to Tom's room. He was snoring, completely unaware of the panic storming through me. I shook him awake, which took a lot of effort considering he was out from all that alcohol. He finally woke up, very confused, rubbing his eyes. "The coat," I said breathlessly. "The one on the coat rack in the spare room." He squinted at me confused. "What coat?" "I don't own a trench coat, man. I don't even have a coat rack in that room," he said. I stared at him, waiting for him to say he was messing with me, that this was some kind of joke, but his expression stayed serious. "Come look," I said. He sighed, but got up and followed me back to the spare bedroom. I pointed to the exact spot. "It was right there," I said. Tom scratched his head. He asked me if I was sure I wasn't just dreaming, but I said I know what I saw. I woke up, and it was there. Then I woke up again, and it was gone. I said we stood in the room for a few moments, both of us feeling the same eerie silence pressing in on us. Tom finally exhaled and shook his head. We should check the house just in case. This happened when I was 18 years old. I was on a trip with my parents and a friend of mine. The story takes place in Sweden. We were driving to a theme park and we had an 8-hour drive. The plan was to visit the theme park the next day and stay at a campsite, but we hadn't booked one. So my dad started searching online for a nearby campsite. He found one that seemed good and close by. So he called the campsite as it. Unfortunately, that day coincided with a big soccer tournament, and the campsite was fully booked. Since we hadn't reserved a spot in advance, there was no space left for us. My dad called around, but we couldn't find any campsites that were reasonably priced and near the theme park. Our only option was to find a camping spot in nature, so we set the GPS to the nearest parking area in a forest to avoid parking fines. Eventually, we found a spot in a nature reserve. When we arrived, there were some people around, so we asked if it was okay to set up our tents there and whether it was a good place to stay. A woman who was hiking told us it was a good place to sleep and that there were no problems with us staying there. This is the scariest place I've ever camped. There were no parking attendants, so we decided to sleep in a small, lonely gravel parking lot. We were surrounded by forest on all sides, and just a 10-minute walk away was a beach. At first, we considered setting up our tents on the beach, but something told me it would be better to camp in the parking lot. As we got out of the car to set up our shelter for the night, I noticed a lone car parked further away in the lot. It looked like it was in bad condition, and there was no one inside. I found it strange because it was already evening and there were no more people at the beach or hiking in the woods. But I didn't think too much about it at the time. I helped my parents set up our tents. They were sleeping in one tent while Anna and I shared the other. And after we finished, we made our tent cozy, watched YouTube, and ate snacks. By this time, it was around 11 p.m., and we wanted to sleep at a decent hour so we wouldn't be too tired the next day. After a while, around midnight, we decided to sleep. At this point, my parents were already asleep in their tent. And Anna and I were scrolling through TikTok when we suddenly heard a metallic sound from the parking lot. It sounded like a shovel being thrown onto the gravel. This terrifying camping discovery will make you never enter the woods again. About 10 minutes into the hike, my mom and I heard a loud scream from a man. We were absolutely horrified. I immediately texted my mom, who was sleeping in the car, telling her we just heard a loud scream. She finally wakes up and says she doesn't hear anything. Reassured that it was probably nothing, we continued on. But then, oh my God, the footsteps. Someone was walking around our tent in the middle of the night. My blood ran cold. I could hear my heart pounding in my ears. Was someone out there stalking us? Then, just as suddenly as it began, the noise stopped. And in the morning, when we unzipped the tent, we found this. The person had been walking around our tent and had even looked in the tent. Thankfully, they didn't find us. We then saw another car drive by. It was a police car. They had obviously seen our tent and were wondering if we needed help. We were so shaken up that we decided to sit in the locked car for the rest of the night. I didn't even get out to pee. I was too scared. This terrifying camping discovery was never supposed to be found. When I was just 6 years old, my family and I went camping. My dad, mom, and my older brother Keith, who was 8 at the time, we set up camp and then we heard a terrifying scream in the forest. We all looked at each other in the tent, unsure of what to do. Should we stay in the tent, or should we leave? My mom and dad started making up excuses as to why we had to leave. Let's go check out the source of that noise. But really, they were as scared as I was. We decided to stay in the tent, and about an hour later, we heard footsteps near our tent. My mom and dad started to panic. They told us to stay silent and still. Then we heard heavy breathing, like the kind you hear in horror movies. My mom was terrified. She told my dad to grab the shovel that we had brought with us just in case we needed to dig ourselves out of a sticky situation. My dad started digging a hole in the ground near the tent, and after about 10 minutes, the breathing outside the tent stopped. In the morning after, of course, not sleeping at all, we unzipped the tent to the creepiest scene. So my brother Keith and I shared a big bedroom upstairs in the house. My parents' room was on the first floor of the house, and I was confused why Keith was waking me up in the middle of the night until he told me in a whisper to be quiet and listen. And I did listen, and I heard what he was talking about. It was our mom's voice calling for us downstairs, but it was in a very quiet whisper type of voice. I was going to get up to go answer our mom, but my brother told me not to. He said that he didn't think it was Mom. I told him to stop trying to scare me, but he told me to go closer and listen. So I got up and went towards the bedroom door. Right outside of our bedroom door was the little hall that led to the bathroom, and another bedroom that our grandma would sleep in whenever she'd sleep over. Directly to the right, when you leave our bedroom, was the stairway downstairs, which had a door as well. I put my ear up on the bedroom door, and I heard the voice clearer. It sounded like our mom's voice calling our names, Keith, Mikey. I said to Keith, "That's Mom." And he said, "No, it's not." Somehow, as a 6-year-old and as a little brother, I found myself being the one confident enough to open our bedroom door and then listen through the stairway door. But now the voice stopped. I whispered to Keith that Mom walked away. And again, he said, "That's not Mom." This happened when I was 16. I was still in high school. I obviously didn't have a car yet, so I was at the mercy of my parents driving me around or just walking if it was close. It was the weekend. My friend Haley was having some of our friends over since her parents weren't home. My mom drove me to her house and dropped me off. When I got to the front door, I saw a woman standing there. She looked like she was in her early 20s. She had a big smile on her face and she said, "Hi, sweetie, come down immediately." I shut the door and locked it and went back into our bedroom and locked that door as well. I started to cry and Keith kept saying, "I told you." We both agreed to start screaming as loud as we could on 3 to wake our parents. So on 3, we started stomping on the floor and screaming as loud as we could. It didn't take long for our parents to barge up the stairs. At first, our dad was pissed about the door being locked, but as soon as we let them in, they saw that I had been crying and we were genuinely disturbed about something. They listened to us. My mom was particularly concerned. After telling us she was not at the bottom of the stairs and she was not calling our names. She asked what the woman looked like, but all we could say was we couldn't tell. Meanwhile, I remember our dad running downstairs to, I guess, look around for the woman. After a bit, our mom kissed us goodnight, and I'm pretty sure she told us to lock the doors, which was a first. I was too young to catch on, but it seemed as if our parents knew exactly who it could have been. Keith and I looked out the window when we heard the doorbell after a while and we saw a police car outside. We wanted to go downstairs, but we stayed put. I remember we begged our parents to tell us who it was and what happened, but our parents would always shrug it off as some random intruder. Personally, I think they did know who it was, and to save my brother and I from any kind of further trauma or fear, they just never told us. The last time I saw my parents for dinner, I asked them about it and they still shrugged it off as some random intruder. But that never explained how that woman knew our names. House Haley lived close. It was about a 3-minute drive and a 20-minute walk. My mom was single at the time, and she also liked to go out too. So she told me that if she's out late, then to just walk or get a ride home, which meant she was going on a date. A few of our girlfriends were at Haley's house, Tina, Courtney, and Belle. The 5 of us hung out in her backyard for a few hours until some boys from our school showed up. By unexpectedly, I mean Haley didn't tell me she was inviting them. The reason I was annoyed by this was because one of the boys that showed up was a boy I had some annoying history with and didn't really want to see. Haley thought she was being cute and sneaky by inviting him there against my knowledge because she for some reason wanted him and I to work things out. It was just an awkward mess. There were 4 boys and 5 girls, including me. So eventually I just decided I wasn't feeling it. So after a while I left. I'm sure after I left that some of the others started to leave shortly after because it was already late. But I just didn't want to be around those boys. I made sure to let Haley know how pissed off I was over text as I was walking home. and she kept saying, "Oh my God, come back." She apologized and I forgave her, but I still just wanted to go home. I walked for like 5 minutes until I slowed down. I thought I heard footsteps behind me, and when I slowed down, I confirmed I heard footsteps that weren't mine. I walked out of my front door to grab the mail. It was a beautiful night. The sun had set a while ago and the sky was filled with stars. As I walked back to my door, I heard a man's voice behind me say, "Isn't it such a nice night?" "Love this weather." I replied back, "Yeah," and that was it. I started walking just a bit faster, but not enough to draw suspicion like that I'm running away. The man spoke again, and every time he opened his mouth, part of me died a little more inside. Like, why was he talking to me? Why was he following me? He asked, "Are you from the neighborhood?" I replied, "No." I was making my answer short and firm. The man chuckled. I started asking all my friends for help to send one of the guys to come pick me up. Ironically, the boy who I was trying to avoid was on his way to come get me. I'll just nickname him Brandon. The man behind me then said something that changed everything. He said, "I'm not going to hurt you. You live by the elementary school, right?" I turned around and he stopped in his tracks. He was still smiling, but now his smile seemed more disingenuous, more sinister. I screamed, "Leave me alone," and started to run. I heard the man running behind me catching up to me. At that point, it was my life on the line. So I started screaming bloody murder. I started screaming, "Help me for everyone in their houses to wake up." And he, the man, dropped his nice guy facade and said, "Shut up, you little." My screams definitely scared him off because he obviously didn't want a bunch of witnesses about to come out of their houses. He ran away into the darkness and I saw some lights in the houses around me turn on. One couple came out of their house and I explained I almost got kidnapped. I stayed there in front of their house until Brandon arrived to pick me up. He drove me home. It was only like a 1-minute drive after that. My mom wasn't home. She was out, and she wasn't answering my texts. I didn't want to be alone, so I invited Brandon in to stay the night. I know he was the happiest camper alive, but it didn't end there. We were up late, just talking and reminiscing about old times when we both heard footsteps circling the house. My room in that house was upstairs facing the backyard. We heard the gate to the backyard opening. My mom would never enter through the backyard. So something was off. I held back from yelling out "Mom," and instead Brandon and I just looked out the window watching. We didn't hear any more sounds. We were expecting to see someone walking around the yard, but instead we both heard a man's voice say, "I see you up there." I let out a very audible gasp and I stepped away from the window. Brandon yelled out something along the lines of, "We're calling the cops." You freak, that's exactly what we did. The fact that this man knew where I lived, he probably knew who I was. What if he knew I was going to Haley's house? Brandon did a lot of the talking on the phone with 911, looking back. I know he tried really hard to be the man in the situation, and I appreciated that. I was honestly so happy he came inside. The cops showed up, and their presence just made me feel safer. Even just giving them a description of this man made me feel better, like at least something was done. My mom got home soon after, and she was just as freaked out as I was. They kept a police car parked on the block for a few hours, as a deterrent thankfully from there on. I didn't do any walking at night. I was even scared to go into our backyard. After that, my mom had to have our uncle come over and install an entire security camera system. He made no effort in hiding them. They were on full display to deter that creepy man and any other creep from coming to that house. I'm glad to say that the story ended there because this incident also prompted my mom to sell that house about a year later, just because my mom hated seeing me living in constant fear. In that house we never found out who that man was.